Strangely, the camera feels higher up, even though it's not. Let me grab my coffee. So I am back again. Hello to those of you who are always here, and hello to anyone new. There's probably not many new people, obviously. Put that safely there for now. Maybe I'll move this closer. There. If you're not already subscribed, feel free to subscribe if you find this interesting or helpful, whatever this ends up being. And yeah, feel free to give it a thumbs up if you end up liking this. Obviously, thumbs up help because there's bound to always be someone who gives it a thumbs down. So it's nice to counteract that. Yeah, I am the real Slim Shady. I'm just trying to drink some of my coffee before it goes freezing cold. I thought it said NSYNC. I thought we're doing like 90s pop bands. So we will attempt to keep to a reasonable time period. I'm going to try not to touch the live chat so that it'll just keep scrolling, and I'll probably miss stuff then, obviously, but that way I won't end up trying to kind of keep scrolling down and have it jump and all the other stuff. I don't know what. Trying to figure out what your what's your little emoji thingy? That's Holly. Oh, puts on a cape. That's Superman. Yeah, you're not going to get 90s pop tunes sung. Let me just move last night's sheet of paper out the way. We don't need that at the moment. Yeah, well, the Superwoman makes a bit more sense than Superman. Yeah, so the sleep meditations, obviously what I regularly point out on my channel is that the only way that I can manage to do the long sleep meditations is to do the live streams. And so I have kind of a number of people. When I polled last year people about whether I should do the live streams or not, I think it was like 90 something percent of people, like 96 or something percent of people, out of quite a lot of people responding, said, no, hate you doing the live streams, don't do them. So they ticked no, and then they commented saying they hate them, that they're tempted to unsubscribe because of me doing the live streams, etc. And I tried explaining then, as I've often explained since, that because they'll say, can't you just make more long stories? We want more long stories. We don't want all these kind of 25 to 35-minute stories. We want long stories. Can't you just do more long stories instead of doing live streams? And I kept trying to explain that it's the live streams that get the long stories. If I didn't do the live streams, you wouldn't have long sleep meditations on my channel. And so I would explain that and say, you 100% sure that 96% of you are voting for me to stop doing the live streams, which means you're also voting for me to stop doing the long sleep stories. And I then got all the sort of comments about, you're just trying to blackmail us, saying you refuse to do the long sleep stories if we don't let you do the live streams. And it was like, no, this is kind of how it works. Anyone who's taken part in the live streams will know that the reason there's a long story is because of you guys and your suggestions, and there being a lot of suggestions for me to work with, and creative suggestions that I wouldn't have thought of off the top of my head, especially when I'm trying to do this on a weekly basis. So I obviously just carry on doing them, and there are some of you who appreciate that. Um, but it seems illogical to kind of shoot yourself in the foot. Say, I don't like this. I just want that. It's like I obviously get that with my hypnosis things as well. Uh, I've got my learn hypnosis in an hour video that's on my channel, and it's actually very quick learning hypnosis in an hour. Especially when in that one video you learn 6 different hypnotic inductions, and a large part of it is teaching you how to not just know those 6 inductions, but how to actually um, do hypnosis unscripted with literally anyone at all. And you learn all that in less than an hour. And the number of comments I get where people say, um, TLDR, I'm not listening to this. It's too long. I just want the 3-minute version. And I just think, kind of need to, get a bit of background to what, I don't know. It confuses me. There seems to be a whole new generation of people that would love a quick fix for everything, or who want one thing but don't want the process of achieving it. So yeah, yeah, doing a Zoom meeting, dress as Wonder Woman for that. Yeah, I emojis totally baffle me. I never understand emojis. I don't sort of know how to respond when people use emojis. So some emojis obviously are relatively understandable, like a big smiley face or something. But others, and on here, what I had just tried doing before I asked what that emoji was, is I tried hovering the cursor over it. For example, if I hover the cursor over the crying face emojis, it says loudly crying face. That tells me what it is and I can understand it. Um, the Superwoman one, it didn't tell me that. So, yeah, it is like people essentially just saying, "Oh, I don't want these years of development. I just want the city." And you try saying, "Well, no, you've got to have the years of development to create the city," and they don't want that. Um, yeah, it's always confused me, but the whole people complaining about something, and I often point out that if you attend professional training, hypnotherapy training, you're probably going to be spending a vast amount of money and signing up to something that's many hours long. Whereas a YouTube video that's an hour long that teaches you 6 different ways of doing hypnosis, and you know gives you the knowledge that you can then go and practice to learn to be able to hypnotize anyone unscripted, is actually a very good kind of bargain, sort of time saving thing. It's good, but yeah, it does confuse me. I know exactly. You can get an Olympic medal for sitting down. Yeah, I only hovered over the first one that was posted. I didn't hover over the whole series of them that was just posted. Um, but yeah, so with uh, chocolate, with I can't even remember what I was going to say now. Yeah, with emojis, I was just sort of finishing talking about that. I can understand obvious ones like someone crying. I get a bit confused with the shocked one because there's some that are like different but similar. Um, but yeah, emojis. Obviously, being autistic, I struggle with facial expressions and things. So I really struggle with weird sort of emojis, and so that's why you'll only ever see me use very obvious emojis. Um, I won't use any kind of emojis where um, I can't work out exactly what. So when I'm selecting an emoji, if it doesn't tell me what it is on my keypad while I'm trying to select one, I won't use it because I won't know if I've just used the right one, and I worry I'm going to offend someone by using the wrong one somehow. Um, and that's the same when I read emojis. I'm less likely, for example, to like comments on my videos and things where emojis have been used that are perhaps ones that I don't understand. So I think I don't know if that's a good comment or a bad comment. It's just a bunch of emojis. Um, yeah, you can't generally. Well, I think it's always confused me that obviously I used to go into schools and I used to help teachers learn how to help autistic children and what have you. And it always confused me that most of the training that teachers seem to get in relation to how they're going to teach autistic kids is to use flashcards with essentially emojis on them, and or flashcards with pictures of people with incredibly unrealistic looking facial expressions, rather than teaching kids to read facial muscles and things like that, which is makes it helped me more, and it does help children more if instead of showing them flashcards of a yellow smiley face, you talk about with a real face, you talk about noticing the specific movements of the mouth and the specific movements around the eyes and the specific changes, perhaps to breathing and all this kind of information. That's what's helpful, not showing constant emojis. Um, but yeah, so thanks again for all of those of you who obviously joined me last night um, for the story. Yeah, I'd get confused. I think I don't understand the kind of reason why that's supposed to be a sexual thing, but I know it is. It just confuses me why it seems to be. Let me have some drink. So I don't know what you would like to talk about today. I specifically didn't have an agenda, um, partly because obviously I was up very late last night doing last night's live stream and didn't get round to focusing because I was trying to get some work done earlier on today, so I didn't manage to get focusing on whether there's something I can do to start off today's stream until like 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever. Where I thought, oh, I best get round to actually placing a video here. And so I went and picked up the foxes from the living room and quickly just took a photo of them for the or held them in front of the computer for the thumbnail, and then just to try and find some random thing for the thumbnail as usual. It's Marcus and Fenella Fox. I don't know what the child fox's name is. Well, yeah, I always thought it was lots of love until someone eventually said that it was laugh out loud. No, I've never noticed that it looks remotely phallic. Um, Not unless there's some problems going on somewhere. Thing is, you'd think that the date would end up, things would work out. You would just kind of share that with the person, they would probably crease up laughing, and then give them another go at going out with them. Yes, the two older looking foxes, they are kind of handmade ones and come from a shop down the road. Um, Abby saw them in the window every time we walked past, and then obviously one day, I think approaching Christmas or something, I went and bought them. Obviously, you couldn't buy one and not the other because they're a couple. So I went and bought them. Yeah, exactly. Why not a cucumber? That would make at least a bit of sense. If someone told me that that was, oh, it's because it's got sexual connotations or something, that would kind of make sense. Yes, I'm glad many of us don't get the eggplant thing. Yeah, I find that one good thing is obviously to just video record yourself and watch yourself as a way of learning to read what's going on inside of people, to notice the different expressions and things. Obviously, being autistic means that my face doesn't necessarily move how it's supposed to, so I can't necessarily work out what emotion I might be feeling just from looking at my face. But you can do other observation from it. Oh yeah, you don't want it in slices. That could be uncomfortable. What was the favorite part of our meditation last night? Um, I'm assuming that question's at me. It could be at anyone. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to remember it. I think I just liked the um, the concept. I like the idea of um, kind of just taking a different take on spirit animals and having it that any animal actually could just be your spirit animal. That it's more about the connection, almost like a spiritual connection, so to speak, with the animal, and that the animal manages through some kind of universal consciousness to have that connection with you, rather than it being about essentially like a dead animal that floats in the sky and follows you around or something. Um, I quite like that idea, um, that was sort of carried through the story. So for me, it's probably that idea. And I like the fact that I managed to do a story about a photographer who's just taking photos, essentially. Obviously, I didn't say whether that's his full time job, but either way, he's definitely, or the person, whoever. So in my case, it would be he because I said you, because it's first person. But they're a photographer in the story, at least as an interest. So I quite liked having the opportunity to have people take photos. And I think a lot of pet owners can probably um, relate to the idea of having certain bonds, deeper bonds and connections with their pets than science or whatever might give credit for. And that they do seem to understand and respond on an emotional level and on a kind of connecting level far more than than I think should be possible, potentially. Yeah, I strongly recommend that autistic people do, well, technically everyone, because everyone can learn from recording themselves and then being able to think, right, I want to change this part of that behavior and that part of this behavior. And everyone can record themselves and do that. But autistic people, especially, and especially autistic younger people, where they're still learning and trying to develop their skills ready for, as they grow older and interact more socially with people, and in different contexts. I think it's helpful, but not just because it's very difficult for people to necessarily even observe themselves if they don't know what to look for. Um, so I think it's having someone there who can help them, who can watch with them and say, notice the way that you're doing this behavior here, notice the way you're doing that behavior there. Um, so yeah, so I definitely think that sort of thing is helpful. Yeah, having your makeup done by the kids. Again, it was more about just, being able to, um, I don't know, be more in the moment and not take yourself so seriously, and not take, you know, life so seriously. So there are serious things in life that you have to pay serious attention to. But at the same time, you can end up getting so bogged down into the seriousness of life that you miss out on living life. And that sometimes being the butt of a joke or whatever on purpose, just by choice, allowing yourself to not take yourself so seriously can make others happy and can start spreading happiness among people. And that's why I've let kids paint my face in children's homes and things. That's why I've dressed up, um, in fancy dress, or um, as a woman, as has been seen in some of the photos I've shared, is because it's kind of like, well, this will make people laugh, and if people are laughing and I'm not taking myself too seriously, then that's making people feel good, and it's free. It doesn't, it's no effort to make people feel good by just not taking yourself seriously. And it's better than trying to get a laugh by making others feel bad, or taking the mickey out of a certain group of people or anything like that. Um, yeah, I've often talked about, as a teenager, my experiences of spending so many hours in front of a mirror, practicing different things, practicing different behaviors, different body language, different ways that I'm supposed to respond and sort of act to display different emotions and things like that, so that I can practice and try and get them as accurate as possible. And I've said the same in relation to, in relation to therapy. I might grab for some books in a minute, but I often point out the sort of books that I recommend when people say, "Oh, what book would you recommend if I wanted to become, say, a hypnotherapist or whatever type of therapist?" The books I recommend are normally not the books that others recommend. They're always books that are pretty scientific. Um, but for example, in relation to therapy, I recommend specific books about improving your practice. And so obviously one thing that you do to improve your practice is that at the end of your sessions, I assume most other therapists do this as well, but at the end of your sessions, you would ask for feedback from your client about, scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best it could possibly be, 0 being the opposite. uh, you know how did I do today? How was this therapy session? How was my performance within this therapy session? And then I always point out, uh, don't give me a 10 because my next question, because people used to give me a 10, which I would know is a lie. And so I'd always say, don't give me a 10 because my next question is, what would I have to have done differently for you to rate me a point higher? And so people will then give me like an 8 or a 9 or something. And then I'll say, what could I have done differently? And that's where people then say, well, when you did this, that really annoyed me. Or um, when I said this, the expression on your face made me think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. He's shocked by that. Or I shouldn't have said that. He's disgusted by that, or whatever. And so you think, right, I don't want to be doing that facial expression in a therapy session then. So I don't, I didn't feel it. I don't remember doing that. So tell me, what was the facial expression like? And then you kind of get yourself to have that facial expression again so that you can start getting an idea of this is what that facial expression feels like. And so that you then know, if I start feeling this facial expression coming on, I don't want to do this facial expression in the session. So you start teaching yourself how to kind of respond better with your clients. Um, so it's bits like that uh, I was doing that anyway as a teenager onwards, because I would want to appear normal, as it were, in school. I'd want, when the kids are talking and telling jokes, or what I assume were jokes, I would want to look like I understood what they had said, even though I had absolutely no idea what they'd said. And so I'd want to practice seeing. So I'd want to practice, obviously, various different observation skills. One of them is seeing how long after someone finishes saying something that's supposed to be funny do the others, whoever's heard it, start laughing, smiling, reacting in some way to what was just said. I'd want to know what that time period is. What is the time period that becomes too long? So it can be that I wouldn't be basing my reaction off of the person who's told the joke or whatever. It would be basing my reaction off of the others around me when the person's talking, to try and mimic the responses of the others, rather than, so that I'm matching the same response that everyone else is doing. But that means I'm always slightly behind the response, because I'll be a fraction of a second late after I've heard the joke, seen someone start laughing, and then I've started laughing along with them. So part of it would be, what is the time periods for all of that that's acceptable, um, and so that you don't start laughing too soon or whatever. And then the other one is, and what is the actual behaviors that you have to do so that it looks authentic and doesn't look like you're trying, you're just faking it and you're trying too hard or whatever. So then you have to learn, what is that kind of authentic laughing at a joke versus a fake laughing at a joke. And then you practice that in front of a mirror over and over again. And in the old days, I used to also record VHS videos, off the TV or whatever. And so you'd record things like that so you can watch it and see how someone responds. And then you'd rewind it, and then you would try and do what you've just watched, and then you'd watch it again, and then you'd rewind it, and then you'd stand in front of the mirror again and you try and do what you've just watched again. And you'd keep doing that to try and practice and improve how you're responding and what kind of behaviors that you'd have. And you take on mannerisms like, when you hold a door open for someone, are you supposed to hold it open and say anything or do anything? So you start learning, what do you do? Should you hold the door in the first place, or should you just walk straight through a door? And so you learn different things that seem to be important to people. Yeah, I could probably do with some makeup being done, and my hair could probably do with being dyed. Um, but yeah, I don't get anywhere near enough time to read nowadays, though. I've got a Dean Koontz book sitting next to me that arrived the other day, and haven't had time to start reading it. And yeah, I'm constantly mentally rehearsing. So, um, and more so when I have to interact with people. So my life generally is I interact. Well, currently I interact with you lot every single day, but other than that, I interact with Abby, and that's pretty much it. And but in my old life, so where I was employed, I would have to interact with real people. Um, and that would mean that I would have to practice how to interact with all the people. I'd have to mentally rehearse every single type of situation that I think I could end up in, like arriving at work. Maybe I bump into someone at work and I have to interact uh, at the door. I have to say hello to someone. How do you say hello? Because you don't just say hello. What might they say or do? Might they say, "How are you?" In which case, what am I supposed to answer? Do I answer honestly? Um, if I answer honestly, normally it's just okay. But what if something's wrong? Do I have to say that? Do I have to ask how they are? Because I really couldn't care less. And the last thing I want, if I'm just trying to get into work, is to have a conversation about how someone is. So, is there a risk that if I ask how they are, that actually they're going to think I care when I don't? So, you end up running through all the different kind of eventualities of how that one little bit of day can go, mentally rehearsing the entire thing, mentally rehearsing back to back, multiple different ways of that situation going. Then you end up mentally rehearsing when you arrive actually at your office, like at your desk or whatever. And the fact that now you might have to interact with people who you actually know. So, just talking about my experience here, in my old job, I'd arrive at work. It was a building that contained a lot of staff, and a lot of the staff would say good morning or whatever just because you're a member of staff who works there. They don't know you, you don't know them. But they would say it because, well, I'm saying because as if I know an answer, because they don't know me, so I don't understand why they do. But they would say it. Then you get to your actual office, and then you run the risk of encountering staff who you do actually know, and they will say hello, good morning, whatever. They might ask how you are, but because they actually know you, this means that maybe they actually do care if you say how you are, whereas the others didn't care because they didn't know you. And so you're trying to weigh up uh, how much knowing is enough knowing to mean that when that you say I'm, you know, I don't know, oh, I've just had a bad trip here, the bus was late or whatever, you kind of give a response. To what level of knowing the person is the point where it tips into the they now actually care versus they couldn't care less kind of level? And so you're trying to work all that out, and then you end up with things like staff would offer to make cups of tea. Now, in my work, I would always say, no, I do drink tea. But they would always say, oh, no, Dan doesn't drink tea. I don't think he likes tea. Even though I would very openly and honestly say, I do drink tea and I do like tea. But within work itself, I never ever accepted a cup of tea if anyone offered to make me a cup of tea, because I would never ever offer to make anyone else a cup of tea. And so I didn't want to get into that cycle of someone's offering to make me a cup of tea, so I just say yes, because why wouldn't you if someone's offering to make you a cup of tea? But if I suddenly think while I'm sat at my desk, I fancy a cup of tea now, what I'm going to do is stand up, go to the kettle, make myself a cup of tea, and go back to my desk. It won't cross my mind to ask anyone else if they want a cup of tea as well. And even if it did cross my mind to ask, the conclusion would be that will not happen, because they may say, oh, yeah, I'd like a tea with 2 sugars. I'd like a tea with milk and no sugar. I'd like a tea, but not too strong. I'd like a tea, but make it nice and strong. I'd like a tea like, and it's like, no, 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 I'm not going to memorize all of that and try and figure it all out and work all of that out. I would rather not deal with all that, because my brain just won't cope with that level of, I'm bound to get it wrong for people. They're bound to then be annoyed and disappointed. So, well, yeah, you live your life play acting. Um, you almost never are your true self. Um, and you're constantly, this is why when you then get home, you want to shut yourself down, you want to be in a dimly lit room, and you want to just somehow almost decompress and just think, I've got to try and get myself back to a level of evenness here. Yeah, definitely not a waiter. I have walked out of jobs and had no income and no food or anything to avoid being a waiter, in the past when I was working in retail catering and had to. I was in the pot wash and that was brilliant. I'd be told I've now got to go and work serving customers and waiting tables, and it just wouldn't happen. And I definitely don't buy into the customer is always right thing. If customers aren't right, I obviously say, no, you are wrong about that. If customers are annoying or rude, I obviously say, no, that's not how you treat people or talk to people. You say please, you say thank you. And I would obviously be like that with customers. And apparently that annoys customers, but I'm happy for them to then leave. So, yeah, so you do end up, literally, I've only talked about arriving at work, walking through the entrance and sitting at a desk, and then perhaps someone offering me a cup of tea. I haven't even got to, you know, having to turn on a computer, having to deal with emails, having to know whether your email sounds like you're being rude when you've just answered a question, um, whether uh, how to even decipher whether you're supposed to respond to the email or not. Like some things you don't respond to. How do you decide what bits of this is something I used to always get in trouble for? What bits of my job should I tell my manager I've completed versus what bits of my job should I not tell my manager that I've completed? Because if you tell the manager the stuff that you've completed that they don't care about, you get told off for the fact that you just spend all your time. They would say, "Oh, I shouldn't be having to keep watching over you. You don't have to keep telling me every single thing that you do." And so, but then when you don't tell your manager stuff, they end up saying to you, um, "Why didn't you tell me 3 weeks ago that you did this?" Because I did it. That you said, "Can I do it?" I did it, and then I moved on. You didn't say, "Can I do it?" and then tell you that I did it. Um, so the whole thing there then gets really difficult, and then creates conflict with your own manager. If you've got your own staff, then obviously you've got the same issues going down with your staff of trying to make sure the staff are telling you the right things and not telling you the wrong things, and it all just gets so overwhelming and confusing. And then when you go and sit in kind of the lunch area, and suddenly you've got people who you don't know feeling somehow compelled to make small talk when there's really no need, and you've got to then try and deal with that and think, how do I deal with this without sounding rude? How do I say, can you just shut up and go away because I'm trying to read a book, without them taking that wrong in some way, or pointing out to them, you're boring, can you go away? Whenever I would say these sort of things to people, they would always end up taking offense rather than realizing that I'm just obviously saying, you're boring, go away. That's the reason why I'm asking you to go away. You are boring. I'm not just asking you to go away. I'm giving you the reason so that you don't have to be offended or anything. It's not any judgment on you. It's you're just being boring. And people would then take offense, and then you'd get complaints from your manager about that. And so you then have to deal with the complaints thinking, why are people complaining to you about me when I'm just being open and honest with people? Are you telling me I should lie to people? Because I can't lie to people. Or obviously I can lie to people, but it takes a huge amount of effort to lie and to work out what the lie is and how I'm going to justify this lie and what the ethics are of the reason for doing this lie. Yeah. See, I have that difficulty as well. The difficulty of the fact that obviously I naturally assume that everyone thinks the same as me. And even though, despite all my training and everything, I know that obviously is false, I still naturally assume that everyone thinks the same as me, and then get really angry. And I have to kind of, when I was a manager, I was in a constant state of hiding my anger with people over things like, you know, people would have different standards of when you go into work and when you don't, based on when you're sick. So I would be kind of, you know, even if I've got the flu, if I can physically type, I should be working because I can type. And so my level of when you go off work is very different from others. Other people, um, they have a bit of an ache or something and they'll go off sick, even though they could be sat at home doing stuff. Um, there is stuff they're capable of, and for me, it ends up being, my kind of mindset is that it's a very disempowering, personally disempowering thing to end up saying because of this one problem I can't do anything, rather than, I'm aware that I can't stand because I've got the flu or whatever. I'm aware I can't stand. I'm aware that I can't focus my eyes particularly well. I'm aware that I can't work for more than, um, a couple of minutes at a time right now. I'm aware that I wouldn't be able to go out and do X, Y, and Z. But what I can do is respond to a couple of emails. As long as I can do it in my own time, I can be sent some work. I can respond to some emails. I wouldn't be able to like write reports and things. So I would. My mindset is I look at. I know the challenges I've got right now, but what can I actually do? And so I would then look at what I can do and think, okay, so what bits, say it's work related, I'd think what bits of my work can I do based on what I can do? So if I can't, like when I was ran over, there was lots I couldn't do, but there was lots that I felt, well, I can still do these other things if someone allowed me to do just those bits for now while I'm not at full sort of capacity of my abilities. Um, and likewise, I know a number of people who have various chronic illnesses, and I end up thinking, well, and I know some of them end up thinking as well that if only their employers make allowances to, they've ended up quitting jobs because their employers don't make any allowances. They're very rigid. Like one person I know, he's got fibromyalgia. He has many struggles with his health, and he can do a mix of sitting and standing. He just can't do sitting for ages or standing for ages, and he can't necessarily do. He can do like working for as long as he feels fine, but then he'll reach a point where suddenly he's in too much pain. And so he's, he'd said to me, he would happily do the job that he loves doing, except that they won't let him do it kind of on his terms almost. They won't let him stand to do his job, which he's more than capable of doing, or sit to do his job. They say, no, you either have a seat there or you don't. And they want him to pick one or the other. They won't let him do a whole chunk while he's feeling well, say like a 10-hour shift one day, but then on a day when he's not feeling well, either not come in or just do a couple of hours on those days, so that he still does the same number of hours if you spread it out across, say, a month, but he does it on his terms based around his health so that they get the maximum out of him and he gets to look after himself. I frequently struggle to fall asleep, but that's the sort of thoughts I'm talking about now don't happen when I'm trying to sleep because they're not relevant to. I don't need to mentally rehearse sleeping. I just need to sleep. Um, I don't worry. It's incredibly rare. I can't recall a time in my life I've worried. So I probably have, but I can't recall it. Um, so I don't worry, but I do constantly think about that. I'm constantly thinking about, what's the nature of the universe? Is there a way of connecting gravity with the other fundamental forces in some really beautiful kind of mathematical equation? Is there what would different alien life be like based on the size of a planet, the makeup of the planet, the gravity versus like the atmospheric pressure? I'm constantly thinking obviously things like that, and then and I end up thinking things like, oh, I've just got an idea for a magic trick, or I've just got an idea for an invention to do with a car. I've just got an idea for an invention to do with a computer game. I've got another 3 ideas for different books to write. I've got the ideas for the contents of those books that I now want to flesh out in my mind. And so all of that goes on, constantly thinking of things that interest me, that's what stops me sleeping. That I end up thinking I should really get up. I really want to just get up and write all this down, but then I don't go to bed if I do that. Um, so yeah, nowadays, now I'm old, I start getting really bad headaches if I don't sleep. Um, so once I get like, I don't know, a week or two into only getting 3 or 4 hours a night's sleep, I'll end up getting headaches when I wake up in the morning, and they'll last most of the day. Um, whereas uh, going back to probably up to my mid 30s, I could get 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, and I'd wake up feeling perfectly fine at like half 6, 7 o'clock. I'd go about my day perfectly fine. I'd go to bed at sort of 2, 3, 4 in the morning, perfectly fine, and wouldn't have any problem. One thing I have often pointed out is that as soon as I was diagnosed autistic, the one thing it did was freed me up to stop having to try and be fake all the time. All of a sudden, I was able to actually be me, because previously I would openly say to employers when I started jobs, right, these traits about me will really probably annoy you. I will end up clicking pens. I will end up bouncing my legs around. I will end up walking out of anywhere that's bright or has fluorescent lights and things. I will end up um, being blunt in my language towards you, and you're bound to obviously take it the wrong way and take offense to it. And so I'd end up explaining all this, and managers, staff always said, "We feel, it's just Dan. We know this is Dan." Um, and would accept it. But managers of mine would always end up saying, "Well, no, I'm your manager. You just do as you're told." So a couple of exceptions with managers, but generally they'd be kind of, "You do as you're told. You can't just make all these excuses for your bad behaviour." And they would see it as me almost like upfront saying, "I'm going to do lots of bad behaviour. I want you to kind of say that that's okay now." Whereas as soon as I had a diagnosis, I would end up saying, "I'm autistic." And so, and that one little bit would make people then say, "Oh, we'll accept that when Dan says these things, he's not being mean, because if he was being mean, he would just tell us um, that he's being mean." Um, so, yeah, so having the diagnosis helped with making it so that people were more kind of accepting of me. There are still exceptions again. There's still people who, like, there's one person I know who, after I was diagnosed and had told him, one of the first things he said was, "Well, every autistic person I've known just uses it as an excuse for bad behavior." Um, and I think that's all it is. I think it's an imaginary issue where it's just people who do bad behavior who want to be able to get away with it. And so they give themselves the label of being autistic. And that was their view. Obviously, they were a friend of mine for a long time, and so they should have known me and known that clearly I won't have changed from one day to another. And so it was an odd perspective for them to hold. Yeah, so I think part of my not worrying is that I generally just focus on what I can do rather than what I can't. Um, yeah, and in relation to hypnosis, I do have lots and lots of YouTube videos, e-courses. The place I would say to start is just go to my Learn Hypnosis in an Hour video, um, which has obviously been suggested. If you take the Udemy course version of the Learn Hypnosis in an Hour, where it's broken down, I've put all of it together for the video on YouTube. But on Udemy, each bit is a separate bit of course, so that you can learn it in sort of those stages. But it also comes with a PDF workbook of all the content and more information as well. So there's a lot more to it. Um, Sounds good having a thunderstorm rolling in. I'm always after a good thunderstorm. Well, these videos hang around. I've done lots of videos relating to autism. I think I've got like 70 or 75 or something. I obviously did through Autism Awareness Week, did 6 videos, 6 live streams during that week, with one of them being with my wife, where Abby talked about what it's like to be in a relationship with an autistic person. And we both kind of answered some questions that were asked about that as well. Um, and the other days, I talked about things like being an autistic child, being an autistic teenager, um, autism and loss, autism and the current lockdown. Um, I can't remember what else we talked about, but different things. I've got videos on things like autism and anger, and how frequently it's misunderstood, that people end up just saying that the person has an anger problem without realizing what it is that's caused. And people always seem to say, oh, the anger seems to come out of nowhere, as if somehow that's what magically happens, that the anger just suddenly comes out of nowhere. So the video kind of touches on the fight or flight response, or flight, fight, freeze response, and how the anger and perhaps the child responding anxiously or whatever um, actually has a cause. It's not like out of nowhere. So yes, I've got lots and lots of different. I talk about things like having anomia. I suddenly lose words and can't find them and don't know what word is what. Thank you for the compliment. I lose words and don't end up knowing what word um, to find. Like I've talked off, the common one seems to be when it rains, as we're talking about rain. When it rains, we end up walking down the path and there's worms all over the path, and I won't be able to think of the word worms. And I'll end up saying things like mind the wiggly sticks on the ground or something like that to Abby to make sure she doesn't stand on the worms. And then there's other times in business meetings and things where I lose track of words. And there's times during my sleep meditations where I lose track of words, where I have had some comments say it, because sometimes I don't even know I've done it, and I'll end up saying entirely the wrong word that I didn't mean to say, and it just is the one that came out. And sometimes I'll end up saying words that I don't know. I'll end up saying a weird phrase instead of the word that I'm after. I'll end up saying a weird phrase as a way of trying to describe it or something. Or I'm trying to think of some examples that have cropped up in my stories. Yeah, so I'll just end up saying things that people end up kind of taking the mickey out of me about, in a kind of he's stupid, he said this, that, or the other. And other times words that sound like other words, I end up saying the other word instead. So I often end up saying elephants instead of elements for some reason. And I said that completely accidentally in one of my sleep meditations, and somebody commented on how thick I must be, that I said about something to do with the elephants instead of using the word elements, which is what I was trying to use. So again, that's another advantage, kind of doing the sleep stories live on air here, where most of the words that I'm after, I've got written down. So if I can't figure it out, I look at the bit of paper and I very slowly go through that word in my mind. Like I knew that I was going to get stuck trying to say amethyst the other day. And so I made sure that I prepared for it in the run up to having to say it. And I made sure when I said it, I slowed myself right down, and I made emphasis to make sure I was going to say it right. And then when I said it a second time, which I knew was a high risk, saying it twice in a story, I did the same again. I slowed down so that I could make sure I did that. But yeah, I've got, as I say, a playlist, I think, of something like 70 odd videos on autism, because my channel between 2007 and September last year was all about autism awareness and acceptance, um, and about mental health. And it's only in September where I gave into the peer pressure and made it about sleep stories. Before that, I fought the fact that I hated the idea of it being a sleep story channel. I didn't want it to be. I didn't like doing them. I didn't want anything to do with them. So that wasn't what I got into doing YouTube for. Um, and so I didn't like the idea that all of my autism videos, or many of them, would end up getting comments, of people kind of attacking, saying, um, we don't care that you're autistic. We just want sleep stories. Can you stop posting all these videos about this? Even though that is entirely what my channel was about until September last year. So I have a lot of videos on autism and mental health, obviously through my channel. And yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm sure I saw someone mention a comment. I'm doing the thing I said I didn't want to do. Oh, there it is. Anomia, you can look it up. It often happens with people who've had strokes. Um, but I've got a video on my channel about it that's reasonably well. It's an older video, but I reasonably recently kind of re-edited it a bit, and then just I edited. I think I re-edited it on YouTube. I can't remember. I think I re-edited it on YouTube, so I just resaved it, and it then I didn't know it was going to do this, but I think it then bumped it up to saying it was a new video, even though it technically was an old video that had just been uh, re-edited a bit. Um, what's Northern Ireland behind the times on? Yeah, well, for a couple of years, I ended up getting a lot of negative comments. So my sleep meditations, I used to. So started on YouTube January 2007. Then I'd posted, obviously because I do hypnosis and stuff like that. I'd post like once a month ish, some kind of self hypnosis thing, or maybe a sleep meditation. But it was quite generic. It was like, or it's quite varied. So it was like I might post something to help someone to sleep, like a deep sleep experience track or something, whatever I would call it. And then I might post something around anxiety or weight loss or quitting smoking or whatever the different subjects are. And so every month or so, I would post just something out there, like a deep trance experience track or um, some kind of a meditation track or whatever. But most of my videos were educational around mental health, around things like making sure you're getting your basic emotional needs met, around anxiety, around depression, around stress, around worry, around OCD, around addictions, all different kind of topics. Um, and then educational videos around for therapists as well, around teaching about hypnosis. Um, I think in 2010 or 11, by that point, I'd got something like 100 and something hours worth of hypnosis educational videos on my channel, teaching different stuff about hypnosis and with demonstrations and all sorts, and lots of clips from live courses that I've taught. And so all of that was on my channel. And then I'd be posting stuff around things like how to get children to sleep, how to tell sleep stories to children, how to do certain techniques that help children sleep, like breathing techniques and other sort of techniques. Um, how to manage conflict, because a large part of my work had always been managing people who are being aggressive towards me or towards others. Um, so I sort of had all of that going on, and then I think it was 2016. I suddenly had this idea of like 3 or 4 sleep stories, where I thought, oh, I've just thought of an idea of one that could be done for weight loss as a sleep story, so I'll do that. And I thought I could also do. There's one for can't remember what they were now, but there's like four or so different ideas. So I did them all in like 2016 over the space of about 3 or 4 months towards the end of the year, I think it was. And they started actually doing quite well. And I had not been doing much YouTube since I left YouTube because of the hypnotherapy community. I was attacked by and trolled by a lot of high up trainers and their students with regular comments to me off of YouTube saying, can I stop giving away all this content for free? Because why on earth would someone go on the training courses if I'm sharing it all for free? And my view was, well, if someone wants to make a profession of it, they can come and train with you. If they just want to get some knowledge, they can just learn the knowledge. Um, but that got worse and worse and worse to the point where I said, right, forget it. I'm leaving YouTube, deleting all my videos and just going. It's not worth it. I'm not making any money out of it or anything. I'm doing it to share. And so I deleted most of the videos off my channel. And then in late 2015, I came back on YouTube. And then 2016, I uploaded these videos. 2017, I ended up thinking, oh, those first few sleep stories were quite popular. Stupidly, I thought, let's just do a couple more this year, like one every couple of months or something. And it could just be something to do when the inspiration strikes me to create a different story. I'll create something. And it's something on my channel that is a bit different to normal. So it breaks it up a little bit. And it seems like my audience likes it. But it turned out it wasn't my audience that liked it. It was people who weren't my audience now becoming my audience. And I didn't really twig that quick enough. And then in 2018, I was stupid enough to say, let's do 40 sleep stories for my 40th birthday. So I did 40 back to back for my 40th birthday. And then stopped doing them almost straight away, like a month or something after, 2 months, I think, after my birthday. I thought, no, these are far too popular now. And it was in 2017, late 2017, that I started getting all the comments about, can I stop posting all these autism videos? Can I stop posting? No one cares. Like I posted a video about when I was depressed and suicidal, trying to talk about, I think it was in like the men's suicide awareness day or something like that. I posted a video about when I had written into my mobile phone a day to kill myself, and I wanted to kind of share that experience. And obviously the comments, it had predominantly thumbs up, so the people who watched it, it was very positive, but the people who commented on it was far more negative, with things like, nobody cares if you were suicidal, we just want sleep stories, can you stop posting these sort of videos? And then the same during, like, when I was posting videos about when I've been depressed, I had the same then as well, that it was, no one cares that you're depressed, we don't care about you, we just want the stories. And those sort of comments made it so that I thought, well, then the last thing I want to do is being posting the sleep stories if you're saying that you want them and you don't care about the stuff that I care about that is important to me, and the stuff that is technically the reason why I'm sat here doing this. It's not that I like doing sleep stories that's making me sit here every day having a non-sleep story chat about things like mental health or autism or whatever. It's that I think it's important to be open and honest about mental health. I think it's important to be open and honest about neurodiversity and about differences among people and the different way people perceive the world. And I think it's important to have open dialogues about these things and not try and say, nope, we're not going to ever discuss it. We don't want to know that. So yeah, and obviously since coming back, anomia is spelt correctly. If you find my video, you'll see there's another word next to it. I can't remember the name of it. That's the specific category of it, in relation to me at least. Yeah, I think there is a subset of people, and as I mentioned over on Facebook last night, well, technically this morning, um, for me, something that I found interesting is that there are people here joining me here because, as I'd mentioned, back into 2018, which was this was one of my contributing factors for saying I am not doing any more sleep meditations, was that I had done, I was trying to do all these live. People always talk about, um, you know, using YouTube's live features. And so I thought, well, yeah, I'm self employed. I sit at home, I work from home. I've got time to do this now. When I was working, I didn't have time to do things like the live videos. And so that's why uh, I tried to kind of separate out, okay, let's do live story creating sessions so that we can just have the audience that likes that can tune into the live story creating sessions. I'll create a story for them live on air. They've got their story that they want, they've got the interaction they want, and then I can do the ask me anything sessions, which was my way of thinking, well, I'm a therapist and I'm autistic and I've worked with autistic children, people involved, kind of like teachers and therapists and all sorts of people involved around autism. And I've worked with autistic adults. I've worked with autistic adults to try and help them get work and also, mental health support, all different things. And obviously, as a therapist, I've helped around. Well, my specialty when I was practicing as a therapist was anxiety and depression. So depression and anxiety disorders. And obviously, then in my work was always around parenting and family work and around autism stuff. So I thought I've got a lot to offer. Let's just do. People can then access it free because no one has any money really, or very few people have a lot of money to just throw around. So I'll just regularly go live and do an ask me anything, and people can just ask me anything, and I'll just respond to the questions in the live chat and answer questions about whatever it is that I get asked. And if I know the answer, I'll answer it. If I don't, then obviously I'll say I don't know that. And no one paid any attention to any of the live stuff that I did. And that's what I was obviously mentioning last night, that it's interesting that now there are people who are joining me in these live chats, who are sticking around in the live chats as well, and where the conversation naturally goes towards what it is that I wanted my channel to be about all along. So there is that subset of people who do seem to be interested in this. It's just that they weren't knocking around when I've tried to do this in the past. And yeah, my thing is, I often point out that I think there's now quite a lot of autism awareness. People are very aware of autism. The difficulty is that there's incredibly small amounts of autism understanding. So I keep pointing out, and I've argued this in relation to my comments when I've like tagged in National Autistic Society, that they should be focusing more on trying to raise autism understanding rather than constantly focusing on raising autism awareness. Now, it's one thing saying there's this amount of people who are autistic, um, and there's a heavy focus on autistic children and not on autistic adults and the experiences of autistic adults. And yet, obviously, that is a big thing: is autistic diagnosed and undiagnosed, because there's also a big issue with the fact there's a lot of undiagnosed autistic adults. Um, so it's the autism understanding that I feel all the focus should be on, really, not just autism awareness. It's got to reach a point where people suddenly think, let's try and understand these people. Um, and what I find interesting is the number of people who end up finding me nowadays for my sleep meditations, but then say, um, oh, I found you for your sleep meditations, and now I've just discovered you've got autism content or something. Um, And in my work with families, I've often pointed out things like autistic people can go on to make incredible therapists, and things that take parents by surprise, because they think, well, my child has no skills, no social skills, whatever. How could they be a good therapist? Um, and yet, I think that autistic people make brilliant therapists. Yeah, there is a hypnosis LSD yoga book. Um, yeah, I've got, I think, 16 Udemy courses. Most of them are hypnosis focused, but there is one of my courses which I think is still on special offer until the 25th or something. I'm looking around as if I've got a calendar, but I haven't. I was trying to see the date. Uh, I think it's till the 25th that it's on special offer, and that's my understanding and working with autistic clients course on Udemy. As you should listen and stop and fall asleep. Um, just finishing my cold coffee. But yeah, I'm just trying to think if I had any more books similar to the LSD book. I have a lot of unusual books um, like that. In fact, I probably have a book with almost anything that someone, any kind of, I don't know, healing-y type of topic that someone mentions linked with hypnosis. There's probably a book on it. I know there's things like Reiki and hypnosis and um, I don't know, spiritism and hypnosis, and that's probably mentioned. I think that is actually mentioned in the LSD book. I think there's more mentioned in there than just on the title. Implementation, yeah. Let me try and find the book. I will grab the book. Thank you for taking that course. So, this book has a chapter. Starts off with a science cartoon in the book. For those who like science. I'm sure I've got 17 in my head, but I don't think it is 17, maybe 13. Because what I was going to do was just essentially probably read you the bulk of what it says, save you the trouble. That was 8. It wasn't 17 or 15. Page 137. So, yeah, I literally whistle Christmas songs all year round. Um, so this is Then a Miracle Occurs. It's a book I recommend all therapists purchase, and anyone else who's interested in this kind of book. There's a chapter on how to maximize implementation intentions. I'm glad that the meditations are helpful. So I will just read this chapter to you. Obviously, if I get a copyright strike for reading someone's book, then I'm sure I'll live. Just might not have the video up. So how do people turn their intentions into behavior? So this chapter essentially teaches everything you need to know, if you're a hypnotist or anything, everything you need to know about self-hypnosis and about how someone can do self-hypnosis. What's the title again? Then a Miracle Occurs. So the idea is that with most things you have, something happens, you get a result, but somehow in the middle a miracle has happened. It's the kind of, this book is about unconscious behaviors, about sort of non-conscious behaviors and unconscious responses, and so this implementation intentions, I think, are one of the most important things for every single therapist to learn about, because they're so transformative on sort of, well, just on people. It's kind of the bit that says, here's how to make someone respond, or here's the bit that makes you respond automatically in a positive, potentially positive way. So how do people turn their intentions into behavior? This miracle is clarified in the present chapter by analyzing how if-then planning, i.e. implementation intentions, support the translation of intentions into actions. In addition, we'll examine how if-then plans should be worded best to maximize their effectiveness. Subsequently, we'll address the importance of the if-then format when wording implementation intentions by inspecting the extensions of such plans into an if-then-why format, and by inspecting upwards counterfactuals and hopefully you can all understand this. Why are you just hearing about? I don't know why you're just hearing about it now. As an if-then format directed at past goal pursuits. So, implementation intentions and difficult goal striving. Whereas goal intentions, so a goal intention is where you essentially say, I want whatever. So whereas goal intentions merely specify desired end states, like I want to achieve goal X, implementation intentions in the format, if situation Y arises, then I'll initiate behavior Z, additionally specify when, where, and how a person intends to pursue a goal. Implementation intentions delegate control over the initiation of the intended goal-directed behavior to a specified opportunity by creating a strong link between a situational cue and a goal-directed response. For example, a person who has the goal to become physically fit can form the implementation intention: if I come home after work on Friday, then I'll immediately go for a 30-minute run. Implementation intentions have been found to be beneficial with respect to 4 major obstacles that have to be overcome to bridge the gap from initial goal setting and meeting that goal, i.e., not getting started to act on one's goals, getting derailed during goal striving, and not disengaging when courses of action are failing, and overextending oneself during goal striving. Recent meta-analysis revealed a medium to large effect size of implementation intentions on goal achievement on top of the effects of mere goal intention. Knowing this, can implementation intentions clarify the miraculous translation of intentions, so goals, into behavior? even if situations that do not seem responsive to self-regulation, or yeah, even in situations that do not seem to seem responsive to self-regulation. Indeed, implementation intentions have been found to help overcome several problems people may encounter during goal realization. Implementation intentions are capable of prompting particular motivational states or efforts. For example, in a study on solving analytical reasoning tasks, they improved participants' performance by strengthening self-efficacy. Secondly, implementation intentions helped people protect themselves from inner states that interrupt goal striving. In a study, and then it gives the authors' names, implementation intentions were shown to help tennis players regulate disruptive cognitive, motivational, physiological, and emotional states in order to better compete against an opponent. Implementation intentions also support people's attainment of pro-social goals in cognitively demanding situations. For example, when people find themselves in loss-framed negotiations, implementation intentions can support the use of more integrative negotiation strategies. All of these are obviously referenced, so you can then look at the papers for each bit they're talking about. Moreover, implementation intentions can be used to replace bad behavioral habits that threaten the realization of attractive goals, e.g., wasteful recycling behaviors for people with the goal to protect the environment, with more appropriate behaviors, e.g., recycling. Lastly, there are three ways in which unwanted automatic processes that cause problems for goal realization can be controlled by using implementation intentions. First, these plans help suppress unwanted cognitive responses. For example, they can reduce automatic stereotyping by automating counter stereotypic thoughts. Second, they can improve emotion regulation in aversion and fear triggering situations. For example, implementation intentions were shown to reduce arousal when fear or disgust triggering stimuli were present. That this strategic emotion regulation by if-then plans operates in an automatic fashion was supported by evidence from early electrocortical correlates. Finally, implementation intentions can enhance behavioral inhibition. For example, inhibition performance in a neuropsychological task, i.e., stop task, was improved among children with ADHD by using implementation intentions. How are implementation intentions worded most effectively, which is probably what people would want? The implementation intentions used in the reported experimental research were always found to be highly effective. Other research has demonstrated that the effectiveness does not produce costs in terms of rigidity or ego depletion. Does this connote that implementation intentions are always effective in terms of meeting one's goals? Several limits of the effectiveness of implementation intentions have been found in terms of goal attributes, self-beliefs, and personality factors. First, a weak commitment to the respective goal intention limits the effectiveness of the implementation intention. The goal dependence of implementation intentions may generally protect people from rigidly enacting plans directed at goals that are obsolete or not vitally important. However, it may also occasionally counter people's intentions. For example, when a person has the goal of becoming physically fit, but has rather weak goal commitment, even implementation intentions will not work wonders. Second, low self-efficacy beliefs concerning the respective goal intentions have been demonstrated to limit the effectiveness of implementation intentions. And so I'll stop just a second. So in relation to these bits, it's very important that it's not like a miracle cure. It's very important, for example, as any therapist would know, that the person who has to achieve that goal. So, say you want to lose weight, the person who wants to says they want to lose weight has to actually want to lose weight. It's no good kind of saying I want to exercise, but not actually then really believing you want to exercise. So you have to kind of think about, what is the goal this individual wants? Is it a well-formed goal? Is it a realistic goal? Is it something that's in their control? Like, you can't just say, I want to be a millionaire, and then expect some magic way of wording an implementation intention that will get you to being a millionaire. So it's got to be well worded goals. So everything in this chapter, which I'll carry on reading in just a minute, but everything in this chapter is very, very important, is, very good and very important. But what this doesn't cover is things like, because it's not about it, is things like, how do you make sure you're setting an appropriate goal? How do you boost the client's motivation? So I would look at things like motivational interviewing. How do you get the client to a point where they think, you know what, I'm going to make this change? How do you get them from, oh, I don't really think there's a problem, it's everyone else who thinks there's a problem, not me, I'm just here because everyone thinks that I should be? How do you get someone to go from there? And obviously this is the whole aim of motivational interviewing. How do you get someone from there to a point where they think, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually go and get and make these changes. And then they plan how they're going to make the changes, and then they go and do it. So having your kind of therapy bit, that sort of therapy knowledge as a therapist around this makes it significantly easier. And so for self-hypnosis, this works brilliantly, as you'll pick up on when I get to it. So I talked the other day about Milton Erickson, and how Milton Erickson, one thing he did when it came to self-hypnosis, he said that what worked for him was that he'd wake up in the morning, he would say, like with pain management, he would wake up in the morning in agony, and he would say, can you get rid of all of my pain by lunchtime, please? And then he'd carry on with his day. Because his view was, you don't have like a magic unconscious mind that's shut off and you've got to go into a weird state of mind to access it. You are a whole being. You're always there listening. It's not like there's a part of you that's shut off and ignoring you until you put it in a special magic state to communicate with it. So why not just say, as if you're talking to yourself, but in third person, by this time, can you please get rid of my pain? And then just carry on with your day, and just trust that it heard your message and that it will get on with it. And so he was essentially, if you sort of read his stuff, saying to do implementation intentions, do a kind of, by this time, or if this point happens, I want this outcome kind of thing. And that's what I've often done since reading about Erickson doing it, thinking, why do I do all of this attempting to, like, oh, I can't get self-hypnosis to work because I can't get myself into a deep state and all that rubbish. Instead, it's not like I'm trying to get myself, it's not like there's more than one of me in my head. There's only me. So why not just say, could you get this done for me, please? And then crack on and just be polite and civil with yourself and let it do the work. But anyway, I will carry on. If I can remember where I was. I read that bit. Yeah. For instance, when a person unwarrantedly doubts his or her ability to run for 30 minutes, a relevant implementation intention may not support goal attainment. Moreover, individuals who preferably evaluate their behavior according to others' standards, so all stuff I was just sort of talking about, i.e. people who score high on socially prescribed perfectionism, do not seem to benefit from forming implementation intentions. Possibly the personality attribute of socially prescribed perfectionism hinders full commitment to if-then plans, thus reducing the effectiveness of these plans. The other one I'll mention just while it's in my head is, for those of you who do hypnosis and things, you can think about when you give hypnotic suggestions about giving them as implementation intentions, so that you're giving the post-hypnotic suggestions in a if-then kind of way, if or even when, when you find yourself in this situation, then you'll do X. And you can think of them as implementation intentions in the way you give your post-hypnotic suggestions. Whereas persons with a low level of conscientiousness immensely benefited from forming implementation intentions. Those with a high level of conscientiousness did not. The superior performance of high conscientiousness individuals left little room for improvement. So if you believe you're already good enough, you're not going to get better. In addition to the limitations caused by these moderators of implementation intention effects, attributes of implementation intentions themselves, namely the wording and format of these plans, might limit their effects on goal-striving behavior. In everyday life, people may not succeed in forming effective implementation intentions, either because the if component or the then component is specified suboptimally, or because the format of the implementation intention as a whole is inappropriate. The remainder of this chapter will inspect these potential limits and how implementation intentions should be formed to maximize goal attainment. How to word the if component. According to the theory of intentional action control, planning a situation in which one intends to act on a goal via the formation of an implementation intention leads to heightened cognitive accessibility of the mental representation of the situation. This accessibility persists over time until the plan is enacted or the goal is achieved or dismissed. The heightened activation of the critical situation helps people to easily recall the specified situation and leads to swift attention when the situation arises. For example, in a study, it was observed that implementation intentions improve cue detection, so fewer misses and more hits, without stimulating erroneous responses to similar cues, so false alarms and correct rejections. However, because attentional and cognitive resources are limited, the increased readiness to attend to an implementation intention's critical cue should reduce attention to other cues. Given this consequence, can specify situational cues in the implementation intention's if component both support and hamper goal attainment. 3 studies tested this hypothesis. Cue detection during goal pursuit. In a story listening, that's very relevant. In a story listening study, participants had to identify 5-letter words in the recorded story that was quickly read aloud. Before listening to the story, all participants familiarized themselves with the 2 most common 5-letter words, Laura and mouse, in the implementation intention conditions. They additionally included these words in if-then plans. If I hear the word Laura, then I will immediately press the L. If I hear the word mouse, then I'll immediately press the M. The facilitated detection of the critical 5-letter words would indicate a shift in attention to the implementation intention's cues. As attentional resources are limited, it was predicted that implementation intentions would increase performance in response to the 2 critical 5-letter words, but impair performance in response to the remaining 5-letter words, in line with these assumptions. Implementation intentions increased performance in response to the critical words, but at the cost of reduced performance in response to the remaining 5-letter words. Thus, preferring one situational means by including it in an implementation intention may compromise the use of alternative means to the goal. Attention attracting during the pursuit of unrelated goals. Will critical cues even attract attention when they occur during the pursuit of an unrelated goal? To test this, some researchers conducted 2 attention disrupting studies. In both studies, the disruption of attention through implementation intentions was investigated by presenting critical situations, stimuli that were part of an implementation intention for an unrelated task, as task-irrelevant distractors, along with task-relevant stimuli in a so-called flanker paradigm. In the first study, half of the participants formed implementation intentions. If I see the word flower, so if I see flower, then I'll press the left control key. If I see insect, then I'll press the right control key. The other half of the participants formed control intentions. I will respond to flower as quickly and accurately as possible. I'll respond to insect as quickly and accurately as possible. I'll press the left control key as quickly and accurately as possible. And I will press the right control key as quickly and accurately as possible. These intentions were directed at the goal of performing well on a subsequent categorization task, a flower versus insect implicit association task. Next, participants worked on the ostensibly unrelated flanker task, in which they had to make word versus non-word decisions, while both neural and critical stimuli were presented as task-irrelevant distractors. The results indicated that the presence of a critical stimuli slowed down participants' responses. However, this effect only occurred when they had formed implementation intentions, not when they'd formed control intentions. In the second study, these findings were replicated using a flanker task with vowel versus consonant classifications. Taken together, these findings imply that critical situations will not escape a person's attention when they've been included in an implementation intention, regardless of whether the implementation intention is goal relevant or not. This may, however, compromise attention to other goal relevant cues, as attention is a limited resource. Thus, one has to be careful which critical situational cues one includes in the if component of an implementation intention. One way to prevent missing alternative opportunities would be to formulate rather inclusive situational descriptions in the if component of one's implementation intention. For example, to ensure one uses an unexpected good opportunity on Tuesday to go for a run, one may simply specify once a week after work in the if component instead of if I arrive at home after work on Friday at 5 p.m. However, a potential problem of using more inclusive formulation is that the critical situation may not acquire a sufficiently high state of activation and thus not allow effortless identification of the situation once it occurs. Consequently, more inclusive formulated if components might not ensure that a good opportunity to act is captured, especially when an immediate recognition of the opportunity is required. Inclusive if components. The effectiveness of inclusive as compared to specific formulations of the if component was tested in a car race study. The participants' task was to drive as fast as possible on a computer-based car race simulation without damaging the car in potentially dangerous situations, such as on slippery racetracks around competing cars and in sharp curves. After completing 2 laps around the racetrack, participants worked on a so-called intention training, which served to manipulate their intentions. All participants formed the goal intention: I'll complete the racetrack as fast and as damage-free as possible. Participants in the specific implementation intention conditions additionally added the implementation intention: if I see a black and white curve road sign, then I'll immediately adapt my speed. Participants in the inclusive implementation intention condition added the implementation intention: if I enter a dangerous situation, then I'll immediately adapt my speed. After this intention manipulation, they drove 2 more laps around the racetrack. Although the inclusive implementation intention included various dangerous situations, it was predicted that specific if component formulation would lead to an increased performance compared to an unspecified if component, as the classification of a dangerous situation requires the effortful assessment of the actual situation and might not be completed swiftly enough to prevent car damage. The results indeed supported this assumption. Whereas the driving performance of the participants who used abstract formulation of the if component did not differentiate from the mere goal intention condition, participants with specific implementation intentions caused less damage to their car without slowing down than those in the other 2 conditions. Thus, forming more inclusive if components does not seem to represent a viable alternative to forming specific ones, at least when the swift recognition of a situation is crucial for successful action initiation. Summary: when identifying an alternative opportunity to act is crucial, Forming specific and exclusive if components might not be ideal, as they cannot ensure the detection of all crucial opportunities. However, when representative situations can be identified that account for a large proportion of the situations appropriate to pursue an intended goal, e.g., sharp curves in the reported study, the benefits of forming specific implementation intentions should generally outweigh the cost of overlooking alternative opportunities. This should especially be true when one is prone to miss the critical opportunity, either because it's difficult to detect, e.g., it presents itself only shortly and thus requires immediate recognition, or because one is exhausted and therefore lacks the focused attention. How to word the then component. In addition to the heightened accessibility of the if component, a second process underlies the implementation intention effect on goal attainment. Implementation intentions create a strong link between the if component and the then component. As a result, the initiation of the action specified in the then component in response to the critical situation acquires features of automaticity. Responses are initiated immediately, efficiently, and without the need of a further conscious intent. So, obviously, that's the whole point and the whole reason for using implementation intentions. That you say, for example, I want to lose weight. You could say to yourself, whenever I get home, I will go on. I've got a cycle machine. Whenever I get home, I'll go on the exercise bike. Whenever I get home, then I'll go on the exercise bike. Or as soon as I get home, I'll go on the exercise bike. And you're kind of setting that up towards the goal of losing weight. The idea is that then becomes an unconscious response. It becomes an automatic behavioral response that as soon as you get home, that arrival at home, and that's why it needs to be a specific if part, that arrival of arriving at home automatically makes you carry out the behavior of getting on the exercise bike and doing the exercising. And so what you're doing is, whereas it might be like, oh, when I get home, I'm going to have to exercise, and that takes effort, and you then have that the conscious effort part, and then you don't do it because you're putting all that conscious effort in, and that's maybe drains you and you don't end up doing it. The idea of implementation intentions is you bypass consciousness. You're essentially saying, when these stimulus happen, then I will react in these ways unconsciously. I'll just automatically carry out these behaviors. And so, obviously, I wrote about this in my hypnotherapy book, in my Hypnotherapy Revealed Introduction to Hypnotherapy book, about how things like this is hypnosis. This is the whole point of hypnosis, is creating that change on a non-conscious level so that people don't have to put conscious effort into carrying out the change. You're trying to help people to set up essentially real life through things like post-hypnotic suggestion and using mental rehearsal or whatever. You're setting up real life implementation intentions. You're setting up situations where, for example, I talked the other day about, where someone gets a craving and you unconsciously and instinctively just go and take a break. You don't unconsciously and instinctively go and have a cigarette. You unconsciously and instinctively go and take a break. That's what you set up the implementation intention around is, if you get a craving, then you'll take a break. And it could be, if you get a craving, then you'll take a break and have an orange juice or something. So you're setting up an alternative automatic behavior that happens automatically, that it bypasses the sort of conscious processing part. So that and I'll get onto energy in a minute if it's not mentioned in here. I'm holding off from saying it because it might be mentioned in here in this specific book. But there is something about energy in a minute, about what works and what doesn't. I suspect it's coming up. So how can this process best be utilized when wording the then component of an implementation intention? Specifying concrete behaviors seems appropriate whenever a whole array of specific operationalizations is possible. Too long a word for me. Planning in advance which type of goal-directed behavior is to be executed prevents disruptive deliberation once the critical situation is encountered with respect to choosing one's behavior over another. For example, when one holds the goal of exercising regularly and decides in advance to go to the gym, then one inevitably prevents the deliberation of whether to go to the gym, run, or possibly question the plan of exercising once the situation arises, similar to what I've just mentioned. The implementation intention helps one to act in line with one's valued long-term goal, even when the necessary means require overcoming short-term costs, like initial reluctance to engage in unpleasant behavior, i.e., when one runs only for the result of being physically fit, but does not like running per se. To reduce disruptive deliberation during goal striving above and beyond the mere initiation of a behavior, simple behaviors should be included into the then component that are easily carried out without requiring reflective thought. Such simple behaviors can refer to single operations, e.g., pressing a key button, or several operations that have been learned well. Scripts like going to the gym, flossing teeth. But in addition to simple behaviors, people's goal striving at times requires the initiation and enactment of complex actions, like applying abstract rules or enacting a sequence of actions that are taxing to automate. Does specifying complex behaviors in the then component of an implementation intention still support goal attainment? Two recent studies examined this question. Switching task strategies. In a water jar study, participants had to allocate a predetermined amount of water from an initial jar, A, to a target jar, E, by using 3 jars, B, C, and D, with specified volumes. 5 trials required the application of one specific strategy, A minus B plus 2 times D, or A minus B plus 2 times C, and 5 trials required the other. All participants learned about these strategies in the task instructions. Before the task began, participants were put in one of 4 intention conditions. In one condition, participants formed mere goal intentions. I want to find the right solution as fast as possible. Whereas participants in the remaining conditions added an implementation intention comprising the strategies explicated in the instructions in an if-then format. In the remaining 3 conditions, implementation intentions specified either one of the 2 pouring strategies in the then component. If I start working on a new task, then I will first try to pour water from jar A to jar C. If I start working on a new task, then I'll first try to pour water from jar A to jar B, or both strategies combined. If I start working on a new task, then I'll first try to pour water from jar A to jar C, or from jar A to jar B. The results revealed that implementation intentions specifying both pouring strategies improved participants' performance more than those specifying one pouring strategy, or those who merely formed goal intentions. Action sequences. A further aspect of complex behaviors relates to the enactment of action sequences. Do implementation intentions only automate the intention of the first action or of a sequence, or do they first action of a sequence, or do they additionally automate the initiation of subsequent actions in the sequence, like a script? To test if the enactment of an action sequence addressed in the then component of an implementation intention acquires features of automaticity, an action sequence study was conducted. Participants worked on a computer-based lexical decision task that required pressing the left control key in response to non-words and the right control key in response to words. As in exceptions, the word jug requires pressing the 1 key with the right hand, followed by the mouse button with the left hand, and the right floor-based button with the right foot. In addition, all participants were assigned goal intentions. I want to perform as well as possible on the task, and either added implementation intentions of or not. Half of the implementation intentions only spelled out the initial action response to the word jug. If the word jug shows up, then I will first press the 1 key, while the other half spelled out all 3 sequential action responses in the then component. If the word jug shows up, then I'll press the 1 key followed by the right mouse key and the right floor key. As participants had to respond as quickly and correctly as possible, the immediacy of their reactions indicated the automaticity of the behavior. As expected, implementation intentions specifying the initial action response accelerated the initial action response time compared to mere goal intentions, but not those of the second and third response, i.e., mouse and floor key press. Most importantly, participants who formed implementation intentions specifying all 3 behavioral responses in the then component reacted faster to the complete action sequence than those who formed mere goal intentions. Summary: in addition to simple behaviors, complex behaviors can also be fruitfully included in the then component of implementation intentions. People should benefit from this possibility as it allows them to effectively tackle more complex problems, like flexible switching between task strategies and the enactment of action sequences. So far, we've examined how best to specify the if component and the then component. But in addition to the content, the format per se might also contribute to the implementation intention's effectiveness. Generally, the if-then format seems to represent an elementary component of human cognition. If-then conditionals are integral parts of information processing framework that are designed to model higher order cognition, e.g. mathematics, language, reasoning, memory, and problem solving. In psychology, computer science, language science, and philosophy. Examples include production systems theories such as cognitive stimulus response theory, symbolic programming language, scientific speech theories, philosophical approaches. To clarify the importance of the if-then format for the effectiveness of implementation intentions, we now address 3 emergent questions. Is the if-then format of implementation intentions necessary? Is an if-then-why format even more effective? And do if-then conditionals have to be directed at the future? Is the if-then format necessary for strong implementation intention effects? If-then versus when, where, and how. The contribution of the if-then format was recently tested in a fruit and vegetable promotional intervention study. Participants were randomly assigned to a control condition, a global implementation intention condition, in which participants freely chose how to make their plan, or an if-then implementation intention in which participants were additionally required to plan using the if-then format. 1 week later, participants filled out a second questionnaire indicating their fruit and veg intake during the previous week. As a key result, participants in the control conditions did not manage to increase their fruit and veg intake, whereas those with global implementation intentions did, although only when their initial intake was low. However, with if-then implementation intentions, even participants with high initial fruit and vegetable intake were able to improve their goal attainment. Similarly, in a study, if-then implementation intentions were more effective than specified goal intentions, explicating the when and where of an intended goal-directed behavior, i.e. doing regular maths homework. In summary then, implementation planning that uses an if-then format seems particularly effective. Isn't an if-then-why format even more effective? One important prerequisite of implementation intention effects is a strong commitment to the respective goal intention. Implementation intentions per se do not affect the strength of people's goal intention. Therefore, one might ask if the if-then format can be expanded to ensure sufficient motivation. One possible way to achieve this is to remind oneself of the desired long-term consequences of goal pursuit. The strategy may be especially helpful when the major problem encountered during goal striving is to overcome an initial reluctance to act on a goal. For example, one may seriously aspire to speak Italian as a foreign language to enjoy vacation in Italy, but does not like learning vocabulary or grammar. How could one remind oneself of the positive consequences of a goal? One strategy suggested is to simply ask oneself why one intends to perform a certain goal directed action. Thus, an if then why format might be a suitable way to increase people's motivation and thereby make implementation intentions particularly effective. If then why and assigned goals. In an analytical reasoning study, participants worked on 20 Raven matrices in which they had to select one of 8 possible result patterns that logically completed a 3 by 3 matrix pattern. All participants first learned that double checking was a useful strategy to improve one's performance on the upcoming task. Participants then either formed a mere goal intention, I'll correctly solve as many trials as possible, or added an implementation intention to it. If I have a first idea for the solution to a trial, then I will double check it. To vary motivation, participants either added a reason to their goal or implementation intention, because I want to achieve a good performance, or not. The results revealed that implementation intentions without the motivation intervention, as well as goal intentions with the motivational intervention, were effective in improving participants' performance. However, the combination of implementation intentions and the motivational intervention did not result in the expected improvement in participants' performance. They did not solve more matrices correctly than did participants in the goal intention group. If then why and self-set goals. To replicate these effects with self-set goals, a dieting behavior study was conducted in which participants formed self-set goal intentions, for the highly valued goal of losing weight. As a baseline, participants' weight and body fat were measured in a first session, and they were required to document their eating habits for 2 weeks. In a subsequent second session, participants were randomly assigned to one of 4 intention conditions. In the goal intention condition, they either formed the mere goal intention, I want to lose weight, or additionally added their 3 foremost motivations for wanting to lose weight, e.g., I want to lose weight because I want to stay healthy. In both implementation conditions, participants had to write down 3 critical situations, e.g., at a party, watching TV, that might jeopardize their goal, define suitable means of counteracting these critical situations, and merge them into 3 implementation intentions, i.e., in the if-then format. In the implementation intentions plus why component conditions, they furthermore added their 3 foremost motivations for wanting to lose weight, e.g., if I am sitting in front of the TV, then I will eat fruit because I want to become more attractive. After 4 weeks, participants' body weight, body fat percentage, and body mass index were again collected. Moreover, the average calorie and fat content of their weekly meals were were worked out based on the food diary. Results replicated the findings from the analytical reasoning study, where participants who formed goal intentions without motivational reasons did not manage to change their eating habits, no weight difference. Participants who formed implementation intentions without motivational reasons lost on average more than 2 pounds, whereas supporting goal intentions with motivational reasons produced an average weight loss of more than 2 pounds. The implementation intention plus motivational reason, again, did not achieve a significant weight loss. Adding a why component to the if-then plan did not result in improved performance in either study, but rather offset the previous observed positive effect of the implementation intention without the why component. Conversely, adding a why component to the goal intention improved participants' goal striving in both studies. These findings do not support the notion of additive effects of thinking of motivational reasons when forming implementation intentions. A plausible explanation is that adding the why reasoning not only focuses people's attention on the beneficial long term goals, but also impacts their cognitive orientation, i.e., mindset, during goal striving. Mindsets are defined as cognitive orientations that accompany the different action phases proposed by the mindset theory of action phases. Uh, During goal setting, a deliberative mindset prevails that is characterized by an increased openness to new information and an impartial and realistic assessment of the information. This benefits the main task during the action phase, namely weighing the desirable amount, so the incentive, and feasibility, i.e., expectancies, of one's wishes in order to commit only to the realization of the most desirable and feasible ones. Goal striving, in contrast, is accompanied by an implementational mindset that is characterized by closed mindedness to new information. This again is functional because it helps to shield goal striving from interfering or distracting information, e.g., attention to competing tasks, deliberating, pros and cons, etc. Thus, within the pursuit of a single goal, goal intentions are best formed against the backdrop of deliberative mindsets, and implementation intentions are best formed against the backdrop of implementational mindsets. Asking why during implementation intention formation might impact one's motivation by reminding oneself of the positive consequences of the goal. However, it might also induce a switch from an implementational to a deliberative mindset. It's been postulated that matching principles of intention formation and mindsets, goal intention formation, should work best when people are in a deliberative mindset, whereas implementation intention formation should work best when people are in an implementational mindset. In other words, including an implementational mindset during goal intention formation and include inducing a deliberative mindset during implementation intention formation should weaken goal setting and if then planning respectively, and thus impair subsequent goal attainment. Do we have to assume a matching principle between mindsets and intention? If then why and self-control? Two studies tested the matching principle by separating manipulating intention formation and mindset induction. In a hand grip self-control study, a well-established test on self-control was applied, namely the hand grip trainer task. The task requires clutching the handles of a hand grip closed as long as possible, despite the increasing discomfort and taxing physical endurance, i.e., requiring exertion and self-control. All participants learned that the pain experienced is harmless and can be ignored. As a manipulation of participants' intention, they either received no training, i.e., no intention, or a paper-based hand trainer task, including a goal intention. I'll press the hand grip as long as possible, or a goal intention plus implementation intention. If my muscles hurt, then I'll ignore the pain. As a manipulation of participants' mindsets, they either received no mindset manipulation or one of two versions of the unrelated paper-based study on personal relationships. Participants either thought about reasons why it's important to establish personal friendships, which are deliberative mindset, or about ways and how to establish and keep personal friendships, which is an implementational mindset for a similar manipulation. By asking why versus how questions 4 successive times in a sequence, e.g., asking why, how, the answer to the first why, how question is helpful. Increasingly, deliberate or implementational thoughts are produced step by step. Subsequently, they performed the hand grip task. Results indicated that overall mindsets alone did not impact performance, but intentions did. Implementation intentions lead to better self-control in comparison to goal intentions. Most importantly, this effect was qualified by mindsets in line with the matching hypotheses. Being in a deliberative mindset improved the performance of participants who formed a goal intention compared to those in the implementational mindset or no mindset, Being in an implementational mindset, on the other hand, improved the performance of participants who formed an implementation intention compared to those who were in a deliberative mindset or control condition. In summary, this study provides initial evidence for the postulated matching principle of intention formation and mindset. If then why and automaticity. The dual task study sought to replicate the results of the hand grip study in a more cognitively demanding speed accuracy performance task. It was additionally intended to shed light on the processes underlying the effects of matching mindset intention combinations with goal attainment, derived from the theory of intentional actional control. Goal intention deliberative mindset combinations were expected to improve goal attainment via resource demanding deliberation processes. Conversely, implementational mindsets were expected to improve goal attainment via automated processes. To test the automaticity of the performance, a dual task paradigm was employed in accordance with the authors. Participants had to simultaneously work on a primary tracking task, enclosing a target circle that moved across the computer screen with a mouse controlled second circle, and a secondary go no go task, pressing the left mouse button as quickly as possible in response to numbers, in particularly number 3, but not to letters, that both relied on the same resources, e.g., visual attention and motor responses. As attentional capacity are limited, an improved performance on one's task is expected to carry features of automaticity only when performance on the other task is not compromised. To manipulate participants' intention, they formed the goal intention, I want to react to numbers as quickly as possible, and either added an implementation intention, and if the number 3 appears, then I'll press the left mouse button particularly fast, or a control intention, I'll particularly memorize the number 3. Subsequently, participants' deliberative or implementational mindsets were induced using the task from the previous study. Next, participants worked on the dual task trials with high task complexity, followed by trials with moderate task complexity. The results confirmed the hypothesis. When the primary task was easy, and thus no automaticity was required for responding, participants in both matching mindset intention combinations were able to improve performance on the secondary task without suffering impaired performance on the primary task. Those in the mismatching mindset intention combinations were less able to improve their performance on the tasks. However, when the primary task was difficult and thus automaticity was required for responding, only those in the implementation mindset combination and not those in the goal intention deliberative mindset conditions were able to improve their performance on the secondary task without suffering impaired performance on the primary task. Those in the mismatching mindset intention combinations were again less able to improve their performance on the tasks. These results suggest that the proposed matching principle cannot be completely explained by the depletion of self-regulatory resources, but that the cognitive orientation mindset explanation is also required. Taken together, these studies provide evidence for the importance of the proposed matching principle for successful goal attainment, rather than the effectiveness of the if-then-why format. Compared to mismatching intention mindset combinations, matching intention mindset combinations improve goal attainment, thereby matching mindset intention combinations impact performance either through effortful processes, goal intentions with deliberative mindsets, or automatic processes, implementation intentions with implemental mindsets. Moreover, mismatching mindset intention combinations limit goal striving, no matter how the mismatching mindsets are induced. As people commonly pursue multiple goals, just seeing how much, there's not much more to read, goals, it's important to ensure that the intentional and mindsets match. Thus, the present findings suggest that instead of using an if-then-why format during planning, people should either combine tasks requiring concrete implementational actions or abstract deliberating. For example, sorting one's emails and organizing a conference trip in one's work session should prevent cognitive processing mismatches, thereby resulting in enhanced performance. Thinking about future versus thinking about the past. Deliberating over whether and why to pursue a goal during the formation of an implementation intention undermines its effectiveness. But what if such considerations are completed prior to the formation of the plan, thus avoiding the problem of mismatching mindsets? In this case, motivation could be increased and the strength of subsequent formed intentions enhanced. Such deliberation could be accomplished through upward counterfactual thinking. Upward counterfactuals are if then statements indicating how a previous outcome could have been better. For example, a student might consider the thought, if only I had attended every lecture, then I'd not have failed the exam. Numerous studies have found that considering upward counterfactuals improves subsequent performance. Several explanations for this effect have been postulated. One suggested idea is that counterfactual thoughts could affect performance by identifying useful strategies and supporting the formation of plans. For example, one could convert the counterfactual, if only I had attended every lecture, then I would not have failed the exam, into the implementation intention, whenever there's a lecture, then I will attend. There is evidence from several studies that considering upward counterfactuals increases the accessibility of corresponding behavioral intentions. However, the intentions, I will do X, examined in these studies did not take the if then format of the implementation intention. Thus, it's unclear whether counterfactual thinking is sufficient to support the spontaneous formation of specific if then plans. Past work examining whether individuals enact the behavioral strategy contained in the counterfactual has produced mixed results. Moreover, these studies were correlative in nature, raising the possibility that the counterfactuals generated by participants merely reflected previously held behavioral intentions. A second manner in which counterfactuals thought might improve performance is by mobilizing effort. Upward counterfactual thinking involves evaluating the outcome relative to a higher standard. These comparisons are likely to cause disappointment with one's goal progress. Theories of effort mobilization suggest that such perceived goal discrepancies will increase effort and persistence. Consistent with this account, performance benefits of upward counterfactual thinking appears to be limited to situations in which the individual is dissatisfied with the outcome. Conversely, upward counterfactual thoughts reduce persistence and effort when they're served to excuse failure. Several studies were carried out directly comparing the effects of upward counterfactuals and implementation intentions that shared a behavioral strategy. If upward counterfactuals improve performance by supporting the spontaneous generation of specific if-then plans, then forming an implementation intention should have no additional benefit. However, based on the notion that counterfactuals mobilize effort, predicted that these thoughts would increase persistence and performance, particularly when accompanied by more negative effects. Furthermore, these effects should be independent of the behavior specified in the thought. In contrast, implementation intentions should lead to enactment of the specified behavior independent of effect. Thus, both types of thoughts were expressed to additively improve goal attainment. In an initial study, participants were told they would be taking part in a study on decision making under time pressure. Participants were required to quickly select from a pair of pictures the one with the higher point value. Correct identifications were rewarded with the point value of the picture minus a time penalty. Importantly, a picture of a water lily was of the highest point value, such that responding quickly on trials in which this picture appeared was a particularly effective strategy. Participants were provided with feedback after the first task and then assigned one of two counterfactual conditions. Those in the counterfactual group were asked to consider the thought, if I had pressed the corresponding key every time I saw the water lily, then I would have done better. Whereas those in the control condition were asked to consider the statement, I would like to know how my friends would do on the test. Participants were then randomly assigned to one of two implementation intention conditions. Those in the implementation intention group were asked to consider the plan every time I see the water lily, then I'll immediately press the corresponding key. Whereas those in the control condition proceeded to the next phase of the experiment. All participants completed a measure of mood and a second block of the task. Performance on this block relative to the initial block was examined. Participants in the counterfactual condition, who also reported less positive effect, responded faster on the critical trials compared to those in the control condition, or who reported more positive effect. Furthermore, they made fewer errors on non-critical trials and improved their overall score more than did the latter groups. As expected, the beneficial effects of upward counterfactual thinking generalized to aspects of performance not mentioned by the thought and appeared dependent upon experiencing dissatisfaction with one's performance. Both of these findings are more consistent with increased effort mobilization rather than with the spontaneous formation of a plan. Indeed, implementation intentions were found to improve reaction times on the critical trials, suggesting that these plans had an additional effect on performance. In other words, those who had listed both the counterfactual thought and the implementation intention improved the most. In a second study, effort mobilization in the form of task persistence was directly examined. Participants were given two-word completion tasks. Two insolvable items were included in each task, such that the amount of time spent working on the task constituted a true measure of persistence. As in the previous study, participants were assigned to counterfactual and non-counterfactual conditions and implementation intentions, and no implementation intention conditions prior to completing a second block of items. However, participants freely generated these statements, rather than being provided the statements by the experimenter. Consistent with the initial study, individuals persisted more in the counterfactual conditions than in the control conditions, but only when they reported experiencing more negative effect. Moreover, analysis classifying the statements generated by participants revealed that this effect was not limited to those counterfactuals concerning time spent on the task. Those assigned to form an implementation intention also persisted longer compared to those in a control condition, but this effect was not moderated by mood. Furthermore, classifying the implementation intentions generated by participants revealed that only those statements related to time spent on the task increased persistence. In summary, implementation intentions and counterfactual thoughts had additive effects on goal striving, with counterfactuals increasing effort mobilization and implementation intentions increasing the enactment of specified behaviors. In addition to explaining how counterfactual thought improved performance, these findings imply that implementation intentions can be made more powerful by first considering how a past performance could have been better. Because counterfactuals increase effort mobilization, subsequent formed implementation intentions become more effective, making it more likely that individuals will overcome the intention behavior gap. It appears to be critical that counterfactuals are made prior to the formation of implementation intentions, thereby avoiding the problem of mismatching mindsets presented during the if-then-why phasing. Finally, these results once again demonstrate the unique qualities of the if-then format of implementation intentions. Although both counterfactual and implementation intentions share a conditional phrasing, only implementation intentions commit one to act in a specified manner in a future situation. As a result, counterfactuals do not appear to be effective in promoting the enactment of specific goal-desired behavior. In the past, implementation intentions have been observed to effectively reduce the gap between intentions and behavior. But how should one formulate one's implementation plans to maximize their effectiveness for goal attainment? In the present chapter, we first raised the question of how the components of implementation intentions should be worded. Regarding the if component, including a specific situational cue in the if component ensures that the critical cue does not escape one's attention. However, as this attention attraction effect compromises the attention given to alternative cues, people have to be careful choosing what kind of situational cue they want to specify in an implementation intention. Specifically, more inclusive, abstract situational cues in the if component does not qualify as a solution. As such, integrative specifications no longer ensure the swift attraction of attention. Thus, the if component of implementation intentions should be worded by using specific but representative good opportunities to act towards the goal. Regarding the then component, specifying simple behaviors such as pressing a key, as well as complex behaviors such as switching between different actions, seems to be effective in promoting goal attainment. Thus, people can also utilize implementation intentions to facilitate the initiation of complex behaviors. The format of implementation intentions was subsequently examined as the if-then format was more effective than merely specifying when, where, and how one intends to pursue a goal. People should apply the if-then format when forming implementation intentions. Conversely, an if-then-why format does not promote goal striving via implementation intentions. Instead, a matching principle between mindsets and intentions was extracted. This finding implies that people should not engage in too much deliberating during the formation of the enactment of the implementation intention as an implementational, but not a deliberative mindset. Supports goal striving with implementation intentions. Finally, applying the if-then format when thinking about past goal pursuit via upward counterfactual thoughts represents a powerful method to strengthen the motivational basis for subsequent formed implementation intentions, which venues should future. Then it just goes on to talk about what the future research should be. So I know that was long, but I decided I would read to the end. It was a bit longer than I thought it looked like, but that's because there are so many words that my mouth struggled to get around. Before I forget, what I was going to say in relation to the sort of automaticity thing, the energy comment. I saw energy, the word energy on one of the comments. Is one of the studies done, which isn't in that. I thought it might have been in that one, but I've read so many different books and so many different research articles about implementation intentions that I couldn't remember which one it's in. One study carried out was with students, and what they did is they assigned students to do some work over the Christmas holidays, and students who were assigned implementation intentions that required effort, where it was along the lines of, if I get distracted, so while you're doing your work, if I get distracted, then I will focus harder onto my work, did worse than students who did non-effort based implementation intention. So if I notice a distraction, then I will ignore it. And that, again, is another really important point. So if I notice a distraction, then I will ignore it. Ignoring involves no effort at all. Ignoring is don't pay any attention to it. That's not the same as focusing to. That's not like we're not talking about something active here. We're talking about what you actually are using effort on. Using your resources for. So using your resources to focus harder on the work you're doing takes energy and effort, and you then do worse at it. Not using resources, so not trying to block things out, but just not attending to it, doesn't take the effort. So that's another thing to consider when considering the formulation of implementation intentions, is can they be formed so that they require the least amount of effort and involvement? So it's almost like it is just an automatic thing, like ignoring. So yeah, that probably bored the pants off of many of you. Probably made you feel like you were back at university or something. If you went to university, I didn't. not a proper one. I'm not going to reread any sentences. I said I wasn't going to scroll back up the chat as well, but as I have been talking, I'm just very briefly flicking through. Um, my view is that all trance, my definition of trance is just focused attention. That is it. Nothing more, nothing less. Trance is just focused attention. So we are always in a trance. The question isn't whether we are or not. The question is how deep are we in a trance? And the deeper the trance, essentially, is the deeper you're focused. Um, and this is where, obviously, I write about all this in my Hypnotherapy Revealed book, wherever it is. Yeah, I write about it all in my introduction to hypnotherapy, along with implementation intentions. That there's this misconception that people end up saying, "I don't think I was in a deep trance," and you ask them, "Well, how would you know if you were?" And they'll talk about, well, I'd be really relaxed. Um, I wouldn't hear you. They'll say all these kind of descriptions. When I know people who think they aren't hypnotized, who are incredibly deeply hypnotized. They're responding, at least, and I've had these conversations with Adam Eason about the fact that I have no idea whether what I do could be defined as hypnosis, because I don't define it necessarily as hypnosis, apart from because it's what people prefer me to call it. But when asked, I say that I don't think of it as hypnosis. Um, you can see that someone is responding to every little suggestion that you give. Like, you give a subtle head nod while you talk, and they start nodding their head and start agreeing with you. You reach over towards their hand in a meaningful way, and they lift their arm up off their lap. And you have done an arm levitation, but you never asked them to do the arm levitation. You just reached over meaningfully to imply that you'd like the arm to raise up, and it raises up, and they'll believe they're totally, unhypnotized, but they're so deeply focused on that relationship between you and them that they're incredibly responsive to your communication. So for me, all trances is just focused attention, and a deep trance is someone who's got all of their attention focused, or mindful, where they've stopped. Their attention is not connecting with anything. They just are. They're just being. They're not actually focusing on any one thing. And everything I've just talked about, in my opinion, just is hypnosis. Has just described what hypnotists do. Hypnotists do mental rehearsal. Hypnotists formulate goals within the client. They do mental rehearsal and stuff. So you set up, for example, so when you enter this situation, then you're going to behave in that way, and you set this all up, and then through mental rehearsal and what have you, and then the person leaves the session, and when these triggers happen, it's like I've done things like, whenever you see a flash of red, then you'll feel a pleasant feeling, whatever I choose to have there. And then you think, I'm sure they'll just see flashes of red from time to time. There'll be people wearing red tops, or there'll be a red light somewhere, or whatever. And so you just say these sort of things as a way of linking things together. But then it's all linked back to the goal that they've set, and you've had them really motivated with that goal up front. And then again, everything here is about priming. And I've talked a lot about priming, and about Milton Erickson used to call it seeding, where you start planting the idea of a certain mindset, and you start trying to get that mindset there. So I talked the other day about Milton Erickson, and talked about, if you wanted an arm levitation 20 minutes beforehand, you'd be talking about reaching up and getting something out of a cupboard, so that you've stimulated the neurology around the idea of doing the arm levitation. If you want, Milton Erickson used to do the early learning set induction, which is where he would say, he'd start talking about children learning to read and learning to write and learning to walk, and becoming accustomed to where their body is, like finding that their ear's over here and all that sort of stuff. And he would do that as an induction. not because he was just sort of thinking, here's a creative induction. It's a bit different than saying, close your eyes and I'm going to count down and you're going to go deeper into hypnosis. It was because he wanted his clients to have that mindset, the mindset of unconditional learning, of not, as I talked the other day, not having that adult mindset of when you fail 3 times, you give up, but having a child mindset of tripping over and failing repeatedly is perfectly fine. It's part of your journey forward here. And so he wants them to have that mindset so that they can engage in the therapy and know that it's okay to keep moving forward with the therapy and for everything not to necessarily be working out. This is fine. This is, I want you to be in that learning and growth kind of mindset. And so all of this is stuff that should be incredibly familiar to hypnotherapists. It should be stuff that hypnotherapists are all doing anyway, but it just puts it into normal. And this is part of the reason why I wrote my book and used these sort of things in my hypnotherapy book, because I try and say, look, all of this is actually normal stuff that's in normal psychology, etc. It's just that hypnotists don't seem to know about the science of it. It doesn't get taught to them. Yeah, so the idea is to try and avoid having to consciously think, I've got to do A, got to do B, got to do C. That's the issue with things like cognitive behavioral therapy at times, that you'll end up kind of being told you need to do X, Y, and Z, and you've got to remember to challenge your thinking and things like that. Whereas what you want is to access your brain on a non-conscious level. You want to make it so that you respond automatically and instinctively in the way that you want to respond. So if you would normally worry in a certain situation, and part of what you're working on is to try and make it so you don't worry, you'll know hopefully what it is you want instead of the worry, which is why you need good formed outcomes. You need to use like solution focused ways of looking at the problem, etc. You want to make it so that you respond automatically in the desired way in the situation, not, oh, I notice I'm starting to worry. I better challenge my thinking. I better do this technique now. I better do that technique now. Because whoever, when they're deeply emotional in a situation, ends up thinking, right, time to rock out that technique that I've been taught. It doesn't come instinctively to you. It doesn't matter how much you learned it and practiced it. It doesn't necessarily come instinctive when you suddenly need it. But it is about making sure it is really simple and easy, and you get it right down to something very quick and very, very easy to sort of say as a statement. And that's why I like obviously mixing in things like mental imagery, doing some mental rehearsal and having it so you can think, right, what does this sentence represent? And what are those specific things? So if it's being confident in front of people, is there one thing, for example, about seeing people, about being in front of people? Is there one thing that is in every situation with people? And that's kind of something they touched on there, was the idea that um, if you're too general, you don't necessarily get the results. If you're too specific, you can miss other opportunities. So you've got to think, is there one thing so that you're specific, but that one thing is general enough that it's going to have you get the good results in the majority of cases, do the right kind of behavior in the majority of cases. And then there could be different implementation intentions. So for example, if it's for weight loss, it could be, if I see steps, I don't know, if I have to go upstairs, then I will take the steps or something like that. And then it could be another implementation intention, like uh, if I have to go to town, then I will walk. And so you sort of start coming up with different ones for the different situations. So no, the motivational aspect isn't necessarily a waste of time. It's a waste of time if you put it in with the implementation intention. It interrupts with it and giving you the why, like, why am I bothering to do this? If you have that mixed in with the implementation intention, it'll interrupt with it. You don't want stuff mixed in with the implementation intention that's going to take the focus off of just the the active doing part, the automatic doing. So the motivational part could be back, say, in the therapy room where you're, or at home if you're doing this for yourself, where you're trying to think, what's my motivation? What's the thing that makes it so that I'm willing to, because you've, as was mentioned, if you don't want the goal, you don't do the implementation intention. So you're not going to necessarily do it because someone else wants you to do it. You're going to want to do it because you want to do it. So that kind of part of it, you would do the motivational part as a part of why you're convincing yourself that the goal is really important, so that you really want that goal. And that's what obviously the research was showing that it's good for. The motivational part helps you to be more motivated about the goal. It doesn't help you to be better or to do better at the implementation intention. It doesn't increase the chances of doing it. And it can sometimes undo it because you're in the wrong mindset then. But knowing that you really want the goal, because you've done the motivational part in relation to the goal intention, means that then when you set your implementation intentions, they're going to be based around what it is that you actively have to do. The other one for therapists, now I will always do things like going through task-based stuff with clients to get them into a task-based mindset, as was described there, before then giving them the suggestions, because it's the quickest, simplest, indirect hypnosis type of way of doing it. Is, I want this person in a task-based mindset, so let's just run through, focusing on the how of stuff and focusing on sort of some structury bits and tasky stuff as described. And then they don't know that you're doing that intentionally to make them respond even better to what you're about to do, but it's part of what you're about to do. And I get this even on, for example, my meditations and self hypnosis tracks and things, that people sort of say, oh, I wish you'd cut with all this stuff that doesn't seem relevant. But the bits that don't seem relevant are normally the bits that are very relevant to make sure you're in the right mindset for the bit that's about to come, that you have to respond to, that's helpful for you. Because if you're not in the right mindset, just telling you the suggestion, it comes back to what I said at the beginning, how some people just seem to want the answers, they don't want the process. um, some people just want me to say, it's okay, you're going to get better, and just leave it at that, and they're going to magically get better. Others are obviously happier to have the uh, kind of, I'm talking about this bit that sounds like I've gone off on a tangent, but I'm doing that, I must be doing that for a reason because it's as part of this therapy. And then there is a reason. It's because I'm laying down, trying to kind of elicit a certain way of your thinking or certain patterns within you, so that you then respond how you want to respond, or how you want to respond later. But yeah, I've said before about the fact that I almost never say why or ask why questions in therapy. And I obviously, when I teach, actively teach that um, people should limit how much they use why statements and why questions. Um, Obviously, you can sometimes get an opinion that's going to help with the motivation. Um, but you can also do that by really building something up in someone's mind of a future that they really like. Asking, what will be different? how will life be different, and you make it so it's real to them, almost like an inner lived experience. So I'm going to go shortly and sort of wrap this up. I would have wrapped this up sooner, but I was asked about implementation intentions, and I thought um, that could be a nice little bit of learning, even if it is me reading essentially a science paper at you. Um, so hopefully you don't mind that. I just literally read an entire science paper at you without the uh, telling you all the references. I think that specific paper on its own is available as a PDF if you search for it on Google Scholar. I think it can just be downloaded on its own for those that don't want to buy the book but just want the paper. Table of contents of the book. There's the first page. Yeah, I would say that it is much harder to have followed everything read at fast pace like that. I'll show you one sort of the top parts first. So yeah, the book is Then a Miracle Occurs, and if you search for how to maximize implementation intention effects on Google Scholar, you should be able to find what I've just read. I think it's on there as a downloadable PDF. I'm okay. But yeah, because trance is just focusing attention, obviously it's vital in therapy. Milton Erickson, when asked why do you use hypnosis, said that you need to be able to help to focus a client's attention on what is immediately important here and now. And you don't want them focusing on the traffic outside, focusing on the uncomfortable seat, focusing on what they need to do after the session. You want them focusing on kind of the issue that they're there for, on solving that problem. So whatever that therapy is, you want them focusing 100% on the therapy and not on anything else. And that's why you give them 100% of your attention so that they get locked into that same giving you the attention back. And you have that kind of really close, in tune kind of thing going on between you where they're deeply in a trance in relation to you and in relation to the therapy. They're not noticing distractions. They're not responding to anything else. They're just responding to you and the therapy. And that should be in literally any therapy session, whether you claim to do hypnotherapy or not. That should be in every therapy session, that you have that kind of, the client is just focused on the therapy and on doing the therapy, not on distractions, on thinking when's this hour over or when's this 2 hours over or whatever the therapy length is. what do I have to do after this? Um, should I say this? Shouldn't I say this? You don't want their attention focused on all these other things. You just want them so absorbed in the therapy that that is all they're focusing on. So yeah, so trance in therapy sessions, you know, trance obviously is just focusing attention, so it's always there anyway. People are always in a trance. It's just what trance and how deep. Um, but in therapy sessions, you want it to be hopefully a very deep trance on the therapy. Um, but yeah, I know it's very difficult to grasp everything when you don't have like maybe some visual stimulus sort of thing like slides or something, or some notes you can look at, or even reading along with me or something, or with the lecturer. So you can just keep glancing down, and it's very difficult when it's worded as I've just read it, which is very much not like, obviously, when I've taught a subject, so to speak, in these live streams, when I've come out and just sort of said, I'm going to share this knowledge with you, that's done very differently to how I just read that. And I think there's a huge difference in how it conveys. So, what we've been discussing is implementation intentions. Um, and obviously, once this goes live on YouTube, normally, after it's finished, um, people can watch it back. They can go through bits. They can pause it if they want to look at the screenshots of the book and stuff. But what gets me is that the implementation intentions and goal intentions and all these kind of non-conscious processes aren't actually taught, um, in in any that I know of, counseling, psychotherapy courses, cognitive behavioral therapy courses, hypnotherapy courses. I've talked about them with many hypnotherapy trainers, saying, "Oh, do you teach this stuff on your courses?" And every single one so far has said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What is it? Tell me what it is." And so I've then had to explain what an implementation intention is, and I've had to explain about the formation of them. Literally, I've got all these books around me, everything that you can see on screen, and a lot more, obviously. They're all based on hypnotherapy. There's all these professional ones behind me, full of hypnotherapy research and journal articles. Not a single one that I've found talks about implementation intentions. So I've got books on the subject, but not a single one of my books, of any of my, in fact, not a single one of my books on counseling or my books on cognitive behavioral therapy, none of them talk about implementation intentions. It's my books that teach about social psychology from a kind of research perspective that talk about them. And it seems that all that knowledge is missing from the courses, even though it's in, there's articles written about it. And even though I think it's incredibly important. Um, so yeah, so I find it quite interesting. Yeah, and I definitely recommend people purchase the book if you want to know more about the whole subject, not just implementation intentions. um, so it has been 2 hours 49 minutes. My plan was to keep it to an hour, but then I ended up reading, and that took me a lot longer than I expected. So that's my fault because I took longer than expected to do the reading, just because I thought it'd be an interesting bit. But I am going to go. I'm going to have some water now because I've got a dry mouth from the reading. and hopefully you're all okay. And give it a thumbs up if you found this interesting at all. Obviously, I will be back again tomorrow, and um, if there's anything you can think of before then that you'd think would be a good idea for me to talk about or something, feel free to maybe suggest it over on the Facebook um, Dan Jones Sleep Stories Guided Sleep Meditations page, in the group, and I will um, then schedule one of these for tomorrow. And if I can think of a topic, we can focus it on that. If not, then obviously it will just be based on what comes up in the live chat. And obviously, I'll try and keep it to an hour. So the sooner something comes up in the live chat, the better. He got it. What did I get? What have I missed? That was light-hearted conversation. We talked about science. Um, so yeah, so I will. Yeah, I find that lots of people haven't. Uh, oh yes, I got it right. If you put the word "right," I would have recognised what you're on about. Yeah, I got it right. I actually knew the name. Um, and that's a partying face and not a devil. I see. I thought it was two horns on a smiley face. Um, yeah, it's something I find very few people have heard of. I mention it quite a lot and obviously reference many of the papers in my introduction to hypnotherapy book from the perspective of doing therapy. And so, yeah, but it just confuses me that it's something that I think is such an incredible thing. And yet, because it's, what do we all want more than being able to change our behavior automatically rather than having to put in lots of conscious effort to do it? Um, so yeah, so I think it's a very important and very useful subject to know about. So yeah, I will see those of you who join me here tomorrow, and thank you for joining me here today. Feel free to give thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, feel free to subscribe and check out my other videos on my channel. And for those who've sort of have mentioned it earlier, I have playlists of autism videos and all sorts of things. So I will catch you tomorrow. See you later.